It was an early morning, and the roads were still damp from the previous night's rain. Officer Mark, a seasoned police officer, drove his prison bus with his usual focus, his eyes scanning the fog-draped streets. He had a simple but heavy task this morning, transporting a group of inmates to a regional facility. Each one sat behind the steel grates that divided the driver's seat from the rest of the bus. Each face hardened by a past Mark didn't need to know. At a stop sign near an old, crumbling intersection, he paused to check his watch, mentally calculating the time left on his route. But just as he prepared to pull away, a sound sharp and desperate cut through the morning stillness. A bark. Then another, louder and more insistent. Mark glanced in his side mirror, surprised to see a small dog trotting toward the bus, its tail whipping back and forth, body language brimming with urgency. The dog, a little Jack Russell Terrier, he noted, wasn't just wandering by. It stopped directly in front of the bus, as if blocking its way, barking as it locked eyes with him. Behind him, the inmates began to stir. Murmurs turned to groans, and one particularly annoyed man with a thick, gravelly voice shouted out, "What's the hold-up, officer?" Mark kept his gaze fixed on the dog. The look in the little terrier's eyes was far from ordinary. It was pleading, almost frantic. Mark's hand hovered over the steering wheel. Years of experience had trained him to recognize desperation in people, but he hadn't expected to see it in a dog. And yet, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than a mere stray looking for food. He glanced back at the prisoners, some of whom were pressing their faces to the small windows. A few of them laughed, making crude jokes about Officer Dog Whisperer. Others rolled their eyes, irritated by the delay. But Mark, unconvinced by their impatience, took a steadying breath and made a decision. Sliding open the driver's side window, he leaned out. "Hey, little guy," he called, his voice low and gentle as though speaking to a skittish child. "What's going on?" The dog barked again, a sharp, insistent sound, before taking a few steps back toward an alley beside an old convenience store. Stopped, looking back at Mark, waiting. This wasn't a random bark or some aimless wandering. The dog wanted him to follow. He knew the risks of leaving the bus and abandoning his post, especially with a busload of inmates growing more restless by the second. But something deeper compelled him, a nagging feeling he couldn't ignore. He secured the bus, locking it and casting a firm glance back at the prisoners. "You all sit tight. I won't be long," he said, his voice carrying a weight that quieted any protests. Mark slid his key card across the security panel, ensuring the bus was locked, and then stepped outside. As his boots touched the wet pavement, he felt a surge of uncertainty. Had he made the right choice? But the dog had already darted a few paces ahead, stopping to look back at him, as if urging him to hurry. With a sigh, he followed, the little terrier leading him down the narrow, damp alley beside the shop. His heart thudded as he rounded the corner, wondering what he might find or whom. The alley was dim and cold, the morning mist hovering like a ghostly veil. And there, halfway down, slumped against the wall beneath a flickering streetlight, was an elderly man. His clothes were rumpled, his head drooping forward, and his face a pale, unsettling shade. The little dog, sensing Mark's presence, let out a soft whine, nudging the man's hand as if willing him to wake up. Mark knelt beside him, checking for a pulse. It was faint, but it was there. Relief washed over him, though his mind quickly shifted to urgency. He grabbed his radio and called for immediate medical assistance, his voice steady but tense. As he relayed the details, he looked over at the dog, who was watching him with those soulful, worried eyes. "You did good, buddy," Mark murmured, reaching out to scratch the terrier's head. The dog let out a soft yip, its tail wagging faintly in response. In the distance, he could hear the faint wail of approaching sirens. The inmates on the bus had quieted, likely trying to glimpse what was happening. But Mark was focused solely on the small life he'd just encountered, the man fighting for breath, and the little dog who had somehow known exactly what to do to get him help. For a moment, as he waited for the paramedics, Mark felt something unexpected, a sense of connection with this loyal little dog, a feeling he hadn't anticipated when he'd started his shift that morning. The ambulance lights flashed red and blue against the damp walls of the alley as the paramedics arrived. Mark stepped back, letting them take over as he observed the little terrier, who stayed rooted beside the elderly man, eyes wide with worry. Even with strangers swarming around, Buddy didn't move an inch from his owner's side. "Excuse me, officer," one of the paramedics called out, breaking Mark's concentration. "Did you find him like this?" "Yes," Mark replied. "The dog led me here. Looks like he's the man's only companion." One of the paramedics knelt beside Buddy and extended a hand. The little dog seemed to understand the gentle gesture and let out a soft whine, pressing his nose to the paramedic's fingers. It was a gesture that seemed to say, "Take care of him." As they loaded the elderly man onto the stretcher, Buddy tried to climb up, his small paws scrambling to reach his friend. Mark reached down and gently scooped the dog into his arms. "Hold on, little guy," he whispered. "They're gonna take good care of him." The paramedic approached again, a clipboard in hand. "Do you know who he is? Any family?" Mark shook his head. "I only know he was here, alone with his dog. No ID or anything." With a look of sympathy, the paramedic nodded, glancing back at the stretcher. "We'll take him to the hospital." "But the dog?" Mark looked down at Buddy, whose eyes were fixed on the stretcher disappearing into the back of the ambulance. It was as if his whole world was being taken away. Mark's chest tightened at the sight. "I'll take him," he said before he could think twice. "I'll watch him until we can figure out where the man's family is." The paramedics thanked him and left, the ambulance pulling away in a whirl of lights, leaving Mark standing in the now empty alley with Buddy tucked under his arm. The dog's trembling gradually stopped as they walked back to the bus, though his eyes kept darting back toward the alley, his worry etched in every inch of his small, quivering body. As they reached the bus, the inmates were still pressed to the windows, eyes wide with curiosity. The second he climbed aboard, they erupted into questions, some laughing, others genuinely curious. "Officer, what's with the mutt?" one of the younger prisoners called out, grinning. "Somebody get sick of you and ditch you with a dog, officer?" Another jeered, smirking. Mark sighed, ignoring the comments. He set Buddy down on the seat beside him, where the little dog sat obediently, staring at the doors as if still hoping his owner would walk through them. One inmate, a wiry, older man named Lucas who usually kept to himself, leaned forward and spoke up. "That dog's not leaving him, officer, even if it means going through all this with him." He pointed to the bars and cuffs. "Dogs don't see any of that. They don't care if you're on the wrong side of things." Mark studied Lucas, surprised by the softness in his tone. He glanced at Buddy, who hadn't taken his eyes off the doors. The words lingered, hitting a deeper chord. Mark looked back at Lucas, giving him a short nod. As they resumed their journey, Mark couldn't help but feel the weight of Buddy's loyalty. The little dog had led him straight to a life in need, unhesitating and unwavering. For the rest of the ride, Buddy curled up on the seat, occasionally letting out a soft, forlorn whine, his small head resting on Mark's leg as if finding some comfort there. The bus fell quiet, the previous jeers and laughs now stilled. Days passed, and Buddy had become a fixture in Mark's life. After completing his shifts, Mark would bring the small dog home with him, each night feeling the warmth of a bond he hadn't expected. His evenings, once quiet and routine, now had a new kind of rhythm. Buddy was always by his side, curled up on the couch, following him around the house, watching him with those intense, unwavering eyes. Mark hadn't thought much about companionship before, but now it was like Buddy had always been there. During the day, Mark took Buddy along to the police station, where the little dog quickly became a favorite among the officers. They'd gather around, offering treats and scratching behind his ears, while Buddy accepted the attention politely but never wavered in his loyalty to Mark. His attachment was so strong that, even surrounded by others, his eyes always found Mark's, as if to reassure himself of their connection. One afternoon, Mark received an update from the hospital about the elderly man, now confirmed as Mr. Thompson. He had regained consciousness, though he remained weak and disoriented, with no family members to contact. The news left Mark feeling both relieved and unsettled. There was a weight in his chest, knowing Mr. Thompson was still struggling alone. And then there was Buddy, who seemed to know intuitively whenever Mark got a call about his owner. Each time the phone rang, Buddy's ears would perk up, his gaze intense and hopeful, only to drop with quiet disappointment when the call ended. Then came the day when Mark received a message from the hospital that they had identified some of Mr. Thompson's personal belongings. Curious, he decided to dig a little deeper. Buddy's loyalty and the elderly man's quiet solitude had already captured his interest, and he wondered if there was something more he was missing. In a quiet corner of the station, Mark began reading through some old case files, starting with Mr. Thompson's background. What he uncovered left him stunned. Mr. Thompson wasn't just a retired veteran. He had once been a decorated officer who had fought in some of the most harrowing missions overseas. After returning home, he'd spent years working to uncover illegal operations within his own community. But his life had taken a tragic turn. His efforts to investigate a ring of animal traffickers had brought threats, isolating him from others who might have helped. As Mark pieced the story together, the realization hit him. Mr. Thompson had risked everything for the very animals he loved, and Buddy had, in turn, saved him when no one else would. Mark glanced at the little terrier, who was watching him with trusting eyes. This dog was no ordinary pet. He was a guardian. The weight of what he'd learned settled over him. Buddy had shown extraordinary loyalty to his owner, refusing to leave him even in his most vulnerable moment. And now Mark realized he too was bound to that loyalty. He had been brought into their story, and he wasn't about to walk away from it. The next day, Mark prepared himself. He would visit Mr. Thompson in the hospital, bringing Buddy along to see his old friend. But he had a growing sense that this was only the beginning. The traffickers Mr. Thompson had tried to expose were still operating, and Buddy's actions seemed to be the last chapter of a story still left unfinished. As Mark finished his shift, he looked down at Buddy, who wagged his tail expectantly, almost as if he knew they had a mission. "All right, Buddy," Mark murmured, ruffling the dog's head. "Let's go see your old man. I think he's been waiting for you." With Buddy trotting eagerly by his side, Mark felt the quiet resolve of a new purpose. He wasn't sure where this journey would lead, but he knew he'd follow it wherever it went. Mark held Buddy close as they approached the hospital room. The little dog seemed to sense where they were headed, his small body quivering with anticipation. As they neared Mr. Thompson's room, Buddy's tail began to wag furiously, and he let out a soft, hopeful whine. Inside, Mr. Thompson lay propped up on a hospital bed, looking frail yet alert. His face softened instantly when he saw Buddy, and a glimmer of recognition sparked in his weary eyes. "Buddy," he murmured, his voice hoarse but full of warmth. Buddy bounded to the bedside, his small paws pressing gently on the edge of the bed as he reached up to lick Mr. Thompson's hand, his tail a blur of happiness. Mark stood back, watching the reunion with a mixture of relief and awe. It was as if the bond between the two was a lifeline, something deep and unbreakable. Mr. Thompson, barely able to speak just a few days ago, now reached out, running a hand through Buddy's fur with gentle strokes. "Thank you, officer," Mr. Thompson said, his voice wavering. "He's my only family. Without him, I don't know what I would have done." Mark nodded, meeting Mr. Thompson's eyes. "It was Buddy who led me to you, sir. He made sure you'd get help. He's an extraordinary little guy." A silence fell between them, filled with the unspoken understanding that they had all been drawn into each other's lives for a reason. Finally, Mark cleared his throat. "I did some digging, sir. I know about your work, your efforts to expose the animal trafficking ring." Mr. Thompson's expression grew somber. "Yes, I tried. For years, I gathered evidence, reached out to people who would listen. But I got in too deep." He glanced down at Buddy, who had now curled up by his side, his loyal eyes still on his owner. "They threatened me, officer, told me to stay away, but I couldn't. And Buddy here, he's been by my side through all of it." Mark felt a surge of determination. I don't believe it's over, sir. I think we can finish what you started. I've got some people willing to help me look deeper into this. And I've got a good partner," he added, glancing at Buddy, who seemed to perk up at the word. Mr. Thompson's eyes held a mix of hope and worry. "It's dangerous. These people, they're ruthless. I wouldn't want anyone else caught in the crossfire." "Then let's make sure it ends here," Mark replied firmly. "No one should have to go through what you did. And Buddy deserves a world where he doesn't have to be anyone's hero." A tear slipped down Mr. Thompson's cheek as he looked between Mark and Buddy. "Thank you," he whispered, "for giving him a chance, and for helping me, a stranger, when no one else would." Mark placed a reassuring hand on Mr. Thompson's shoulder. "You're not alone anymore. And with your knowledge, we might be able to bring these people to justice." As he left the hospital room that day, Mark felt a renewed sense of purpose. Buddy trotted beside him, his small steps matching Mark's stride. They weren't just caretakers anymore. They were partners on a mission, bound by loyalty, determination, and a promise to right the wrongs that had been overlooked. The next step was clear. Together, they would pick up the fight that Mr. Thompson had started, and this time, they wouldn't stop until it was over. Mark returned to the station with a new sense of urgency. The investigation would need every piece of information Mr. Thompson had gathered, and it wouldn't be easy. The people behind this trafficking ring had already proven they wouldn't back down easily. But with Buddy by his side, Mark felt an unshakable resolve. After talking to a few trusted colleagues, Mark set up a meeting with a small team he knew he could rely on. As he laid out the story of Mr. Thompson's efforts to expose the traffickers, the room grew tense. Photos of the evidence Mr. Thompson had collected lined the table. Snapshots of shadowy figures exchanging animals in alleyways, records of suspicious shipments, and reports of missing pets that had never been investigated. Each piece painted a grim picture of a deeply rooted operation. "Officer, you know what you're up against here," one of his colleagues cautioned, his voice low. "These people don't just take animals. They'll go after anyone who gets in their way." Mark nodded, his jaw set. "I know, but we're not alone. Mr. Thompson did most of the legwork, and we're picking up where he left off. And Buddy here." He looked down at the little terrier, who sat alert by his feet, watching them intently. "Buddy got us this far. He's as much a part of this mission as any of us." With a plan in place, Mark and his team began following the leads left by Mr. Thompson. They checked warehouses, interviewed witnesses, and surveilled locations known for suspicious activity. Each night, Mark would return home with Buddy, who stayed close by his side, offering silent encouragement. The bond between them only grew deeper as they faced each new hurdle. One evening, after days of tracking, the breakthrough came. A tip led them to an abandoned warehouse on the edge of town, rumored to be a hub for the trafficking ring. Mark and his team moved in quietly, the darkened street casting long shadows as they approached the building. They could hear muffled voices inside, accompanied by the occasional bark or whimper from animals kept in crates. Mark glanced down at Buddy, who seemed to sense the tension in the air, his ears perked and his gaze fixed on the warehouse doors. "Stay close, little guy," Mark whispered, giving him a gentle pat. As they moved closer, they could see the extent of the operation through the warehouse windows. Rows of cages lined the walls, holding frightened animals. Dogs, cats, and even a few exotic animals, all crowded and shivering. The sight sent a surge of anger through Mark, and he knew there would be no turning back now. Suddenly, a loud clang echoed through the warehouse, and one of the traffickers appeared, a flashlight sweeping across the rows of cages. Mark signaled to his team and they moved in. The raid unfolded in a blur of shouts, flashes of light, and the rustle of uniforms moving through the dim space. The traffickers tried to flee, but the officers surrounded them, cutting off every escape route. In the midst of the chaos, Buddy darted forward, leading Mark to a set of cages stacked in the far corner. One cage held a small, frightened dog that looked almost identical to Buddy, a young terrier with the same bright, expressive eyes. Mark realized that this dog might have been one of Buddy's own siblings, stolen and lost in the cycle of trafficking. With quick hands, Mark opened the cage, letting the small dog out. Buddy immediately ran to the newcomer, nudging and comforting it with soft whines, as if assuring the terrified dog that it was safe now. Mark watched the reunion, a lump forming in his throat. In that moment, he knew that this wasn't just a mission. It was personal. The police finished rounding up the traffickers, and Mark stayed behind to help load the animals onto transport vehicles, each one finally heading to a place of safety and care. Buddy stayed close, as if overseeing the operation, his small frame standing guard over the animals he had, in many ways, helped to save. As the last cage was carried out and the warehouse fell silent, Mark knelt down beside Buddy, looking into his loyal eyes. "We did it, Buddy. Thanks to you, they're safe now." Buddy's tail wagged slowly, his eyes filled with a mixture of relief and pride. He let out a soft bark, as if to say he understood, his small body leaning against Mark's in a quiet display of trust and gratitude. The night had been won, but Mark knew their journey wasn't over. They'd saved dozens of animals, but the fight to keep them safe and to dismantle trafficking operations like this would be ongoing. And he knew, with Buddy beside him, he'd be ready for whatever came next. In the weeks that followed the raid, Mark's life took on a new rhythm. The media had picked up on the story of the heroic police officer and his loyal dog, Buddy, who had led them to uncover a major trafficking ring. The spotlight brought attention not only to the operation they had dismantled but also to the ongoing fight for animal rights. Buddy became a local hero, celebrated as a small but mighty figure in the community, inspiring others to stand up for those who couldn't defend themselves. Through all of this, Buddy stayed close to Mark, who had come to think of the little terrier as more than a companion. Buddy had filled a space in his life he hadn't known was empty. And, unexpectedly, Mark found himself thinking of someone else who had stepped into his life recently. Emily, a volunteer at the local shelter where many of the rescued animals had been sent. Mark had first met Emily when he brought Buddy to the shelter to check on the animals. She was calm, kind, with a warm smile and a natural ease with the animals. She and Buddy had bonded immediately, and every time Mark came by, she seemed genuinely happy to see them both. Their shared experiences around the animals quickly became an excuse for longer conversations, lingering glances, and small moments that felt like the start of something deeper. One Saturday afternoon, Emily invited Mark and Buddy to a community event at the shelter. Buddy, ever the hero, was delighted to see the other rescued animals, many of whom had found new homes. Mark noticed how naturally Buddy trotted over to Emily, as if sensing the connection between them, curling up beside her feet as they sat together under a tree. As the afternoon sun began to dip, Emily looked over at Mark, her eyes warm with sincerity. "You know, Buddy's quite the matchmaker," she said with a soft laugh, reaching down to scratch Buddy's head. "He's got a good sense about people." Mark chuckled, feeling a mixture of nervousness and excitement. "Seems he's got a good sense about you," he replied, his gaze meeting hers. They shared a quiet, comfortable silence, each understanding the unspoken words between them. With Buddy curled up between them, Mark reached over, gently taking Emily's hand. The simple gesture felt right, as if all the twists and turns of the past few weeks had led to this moment. For the first time in a long while, he felt a peace and contentment he hadn't thought possible. The little dog, who had unwittingly changed his life, now looked up at them with a satisfied expression, as if pleased with his own matchmaking success. In the months that followed, Mark and Emily grew closer, their relationship blossoming into a bond as genuine and loyal as buddies. They began volunteering together at the shelter, advocating for animal rights, and working to ensure that cases like Mr. Thompson's would receive the attention they deserved. And with Buddy's ever-loyal presence, they formed an unbreakable trio, a small but strong family. As winter melted into spring, Mark, Emily, and Buddy stood side by side on a hill overlooking the city, their lives forever changed by a single, urgent bark on a misty morning. What had started as a call for help had become a journey of love, purpose, and companionship. And as they looked out over the city, Mark knew that no matter what came next, he and Buddy would continue to walk this path, together and never alone. The story had come full circle, but this time it was just the beginning.
Willow Ridge Clinic was finally quiet. The last patient had left, the day's paperwork had been filed, and Emily Monroe, a young nurse still finding her footing, moved from room to room, ensuring all equipment was turned off and the night lighting set just right. She loved this time of day, the end of a long shift when silence blanketed the clinic, creating a sanctuary of calm. For Emily, this wasn't just a place of work, it was her small kingdom, a place where her budding skills were tested daily, and where each quiet evening felt like a well-earned pause. Emily lingered by the window, watching the amber glow of the setting sun paint the walls in soft, warm hues. The shifting light turned the once sterile space into something comforting, a place that felt safe, almost like home. Yet, as she prepared to lock up, she couldn't shake an odd feeling tugging at the back of her mind, a sense that something unusual lay ahead. She tried to brush it off, telling herself it was just the usual exhaustion after a long shift, but the feeling lingered. Bringing herself back to the task at hand, she turned to the front door, ready to lock it for the night, unaware of the visitor waiting just beyond the glass. Just as Emily reached for the lock, a faint scratching sound made her pause. She frowned, looking through the glass door, and was surprised to see a golden retriever standing just outside. He wasn't barking or pacing. Instead, he stood patiently, his eyes fixed on her with a calm intensity. Emily took a step back, startled by the gentleness in his gaze. There was something almost knowing in the way he looked at her, as if he had a purpose. Her instincts told her to be cautious, yet she felt her apprehension melt away under his steady stare. She hesitated for only a moment before unlocking the door and opening it just enough to let him step inside. The dog moved with a quiet grace, his golden coat catching the light, though dust and a few small scratches marred his fur. A small wound on his left ear drew her eye, and she instinctively crouched down to examine him. "Where did you come from?" she murmured softly, as if expecting him to respond. The retriever's deep brown eyes met hers, reflecting a calm that made her feel both curious and strangely comforted. She couldn't shake the feeling that he hadn't come to the clinic by accident. Emily led the dog into one of the examination rooms, feeling a growing sense of responsibility for her unexpected visitor. She knelt beside him, reaching out gently to inspect his paw and ear. The retriever held perfectly still, watching her every move with an attentiveness that bordered on human. As she dabbed antiseptic on his wound and carefully wrapped a small bandage around his paw, she murmured words of reassurance, almost as if he were one of her patients. "You've had a rough day, haven't you?" she said softly, half expecting a reply. The dog continued to watch her, his eyes full of quiet understanding, and she felt an odd connection to him, as though they shared an unspoken bond. She remembered her own first days at the clinic, the nerves and self-doubt, and somehow, this simple act of caring for him brought a clarity she hadn't felt in a long time. When she finished, she gave his head a gentle pat, expecting him to settle down beside her. But instead, he nudged her hand with his nose and then turned toward the hallway, pausing to look back as if to say, "Come with me." Emily watched as the retriever padded softly down the hallway, his gait steady and purposeful. He would walk a few steps, then turn back to see if she was following. She felt a strange pull, an invitation in his gaze that she couldn't resist. Without thinking, she found herself trailing after him, curiosity overcoming any lingering doubts. There was something in his demeanor that made her feel he knew exactly where he was going. They passed room after room, each one silent and empty, until they reached a door at the end of the corridor. The dog paused, staring at the door labeled Room 3A. Emily hesitated, feeling a mixture of anticipation and trepidation. Room 3A was rarely used, mostly reserved for storage, and she had no reason to go inside. But the dog's steady gaze urged her forward, and she felt her hand reaching for the doorknob. As her fingers closed around the cool metal, she took a deep breath, glancing down at the dog, who watched her with a calm that felt almost reassuring. She turned the handle and opened the door, stepping into the unknown. Emily's heart pounded as she pushed the door open, her gaze sweeping the dimly lit room. The air was still, carrying the faint scent of stored linens and antiseptic. She took a cautious step inside, feeling a shiver of anticipation as her eyes adjusted to the shadows. The retriever entered beside her, his posture calm but alert, his gaze fixed on something in the far corner of the room. She followed his line of sight, straining to make out the shapes in the dimness. A small cot, usually reserved for emergencies, sat tucked against the wall, and as her eyes adjusted, she realized there was someone lying there. A young boy, curled up and sound asleep. Her breath caught in her throat as she took in his small, fragile form. Kneeling beside the cot, she reached out to check his pulse, relieved to find it strong and steady. Her mind raced, trying to piece together how he could have ended up here alone. But one thing was clear. This dog hadn't come by accident. Emily sat beside the cot, her mind spinning with questions. The boy was young, perhaps 5 or 6, his breathing soft, and even as he lay there, oblivious to the world around him. She reached out, smoothing a lock of hair from his forehead, her heart heavy with concern. How had he ended up here, in this storage room, alone and unnoticed? The retriever sat close by, his gaze fixed on the boy with an expression of calm protectiveness. Emily felt a wave of gratitude toward the dog, who had somehow known this child was here, guiding her to him without hesitation. It was as if he had been sent to find her, to lead her to this young life in need. She whispered, "Thank you," her voice barely audible in the quiet room. The dog's eyes met hers, and for a moment, she felt as if he understood her gratitude. This wasn't just a chance encounter. This dog had come here with a purpose, one that had led her to a small miracle. Emily felt a profound sense of connection as she reached out, gently patting the retriever's head. He closed his eyes briefly, leaning into her touch with a calm acceptance that touched her heart. She'd cared for many patients in her short career, but this encounter was different. It was a moment of silent understanding, a bond that transcended words. The boy stirred slightly, his breathing soft and steady, and Emily felt a wave of relief wash over her. This gentle creature, her unexpected guide, had led her to him, and she knew, deep down, that he'd save the child's life. She didn't know how or why, but she felt certain that without him, the boy might have been lost. The retriever lifted his gaze to meet hers once more, his eyes filled with a depth she couldn't quite explain. It was as if he, too, was saying thank you, acknowledging the kindness they had shared in this quiet moment. Emily sat beside the boy, the retriever watching over them both, his silent presence a source of strength. She looked down at the dog, feeling a new respect and wonder for this creature who had guided her to this child. There was a mystery here, a small miracle wrapped in fur and quiet dignity, and she knew she would never see the world quite the same way again. As she looked into the retriever's wise eyes, she felt as though he had given her a gift, a reminder that sometimes the most profound moments come from the most unexpected places. She would carry this night with her, a memory of compassion and silent courage, a reminder of the beauty in the unexplainable. Emily took a deep breath, feeling a deep gratitude for the life she had chosen, and for the strange, gentle guide who had shown her that life's miracles often come when we least expect them. The boy's eyelids fluttered, and he let out a soft sigh as he slowly opened his eyes. Emily felt her heart leap as his gaze met hers, filled with a mix of confusion and vulnerability. She offered a warm smile, hoping to ease his nerves. "Hey there, sweetheart," she said softly, kneeling beside him. "You're safe here. I'm Emily, and I'm here to help." The boy blinked, looking around as if trying to piece together how he had ended up in the clinic's storage room. His small hand reached up to rub his eyes, and Emily noticed the faint tremble in his fingers. She glanced back at the retriever, who had settled beside the cot, his eyes calm and watchful. The boy's gaze shifted to the dog, and a faint smile appeared on his face. "Do you know him?" she asked gently, wondering if the boy and the dog shared some connection. The boy nodded, resting his small hand on the retriever's head. A sense of relief washed over Emily. It was as if fate had brought them all together, and now she just had to unravel the pieces of this strange puzzle. Emily pulled out her phone, glancing at the time before deciding to call her supervisor Dr. Robert Hill. She dialed his number, grateful for his steady guidance on nights when things didn't go as planned. As she waited for him to pick up, her gaze drifted back to the boy, who was now quietly petting the dog, his small fingers tracing patterns in the retriever's fur. "Emily, what's going on?" Dr. Hill's calm voice came through the line, grounding her. She quickly explained the unusual situation. The boy found alone in the clinic, the retriever's arrival and guidance. There was a pause on the other end as Dr. Hill processed her story. "Stay with him," he said finally. "I'll be there as soon as I can." Hanging up, Emily felt a sense of reassurance. Dr. Hill would know what to do. Until then, it was just her, the boy, and this mysterious dog. She knelt beside the boy again, reaching for his hand. "Dr. Hill is coming to help us? Okay," she said softly. The boy nodded, a faint smile crossing his face as he looked back at the retriever. Emily sensed that the boy was still apprehensive, though he seemed to find comfort in the dog's presence. She decided to let him set the pace, giving him time to feel safe. "Do you have a name?" she asked gently. The boy hesitated, his eyes darting between her and the dog before finally whispering, "Oliver." "Oliver," she repeated with a smile. "That's a strong name." She glanced down at the dog, adding, "And what about your friend here?" Oliver looked at the dog, thinking for a moment. "Buddy," he said softly. Emily couldn't help but smile, feeling a sense of warmth as they all seemed to settle into an unspoken bond. Buddy, the name felt fitting. The dog had already proven himself to be a true companion, watching over Oliver with a loyalty and calm that reassured Emily as well. She stroked Buddy's head, silently thanking him for being there, for guiding her to Oliver and helping create this fragile sense of safety. As they waited for Dr. Hill, Emily encouraged Oliver to talk, hoping to learn more about how he'd ended up alone. "Do you remember what happened before you came here?" she asked gently. Oliver's small brow furrowed, and he seemed to struggle with the question. We were outside," he said slowly. "Buddy and me. We were walking, and then I got lost. But Buddy found me. He always finds me." Emily's heart tightened as she realized how vulnerable Oliver must have felt, wandering with only his dog for company. It was no wonder the boy and the dog shared such a deep bond. Buddy seemed to understand the significance of Oliver's words, nudging the boy's hand with his nose, as if offering comfort. Emily marveled at the connection between them, feeling grateful that fate had brought them all together in this unexpected moment. The sound of footsteps in the hallway brought Emily back to reality. She looked up as Dr. Hill entered, his calm presence filling the room with reassurance. He took in the scene, the boy lying on the cot, Emily kneeling beside him, and Buddy watching over them both with his quiet dignity. Dr. Hill approached with gentle authority, crouching beside Oliver and offering a warm smile. "Hello, Oliver. My name's Dr. Hill. I'm here to make sure you're feeling okay." Oliver glanced up at him, his expression a mix of shyness and curiosity. Dr. Hill gently checked Oliver's pulse and breathing, giving Emily a reassuring nod. "He seems fine, just a bit tired," he said, his gaze softening as he looked at Buddy. Emily felt a surge of gratitude. Dr. Hill's calm and expertise brought a stability that allowed her to finally relax, knowing they were all in good hands. With Oliver in stable condition, Dr. Hill turned to Emily, his expression thoughtful. "Let's keep him here overnight for observation. He seems all right, but I want to make sure," he said. Emily nodded, feeling a sense of relief at his decisive plan. "Buddy can stay too, of course," she added, looking at the dog who lay beside Oliver protectively. Dr. Hill chuckled, nodding in agreement. "Yes, I think Buddy's earned his place." The boy's face lit up, and he hugged Buddy tightly, clearly comforted by the news. Emily felt a sense of satisfaction knowing they could provide this small sanctuary for both of them. Together, they prepared a proper bed for Oliver in one of the exam rooms, Buddy settling in beside him without a moment's hesitation. Emily smiled, realizing that this might be the most peaceful place in the world for both of them. Later that evening, Emily sat by Oliver's bedside, watching him drift into a peaceful sleep. The gentle rise and fall of his breathing reassured her, and she felt a calm settle over her as she observed him and Buddy, who lay at his side like a vigilant guardian. She thought back over the night's events, the mysterious arrival of Buddy, the discovery of Oliver, the quiet bond between the three of them. Emily glanced at Buddy, her heart filled with gratitude for the dog who had guided her here. She found herself reflecting on the inexplicable connection they shared, a bond that had defied logic and brought them all together in this quiet, comforting moment. She knew this night would stay with her forever, a memory of compassion and shared understanding. By the time morning arrived, Willow Ridge Clinic was bathed in the soft glow of dawn. Oliver stirred awake, his eyes finding Emily's, and she offered him a warm smile. "Good morning, Oliver," she whispered. Buddy lifted his head, his eyes alert but gentle as he watched his young friend. The boy's face softened, and he wrapped his arms around Buddy, holding him tightly. Emily felt a bittersweet pang as she realized this night would soon end, but she knew it had marked a new beginning for her. The experience had left her changed, opening her heart in ways she hadn't expected. She would carry this memory, the quiet miracle that had unfolded in the clinic, with her always. As they prepared to leave, Emily knelt beside Buddy, whispering a heartfelt, "Thank you." He looked back at her, his wise eyes full of understanding. She knew their journey together had reached its end, but the bond they'd shared would linger in her heart forever. Morning sunlight poured through the windows of Willow Ridge Clinic, illuminating the small exam room where Oliver lay with Buddy curled up beside him. Emily stood by the door, watching the peaceful scene and feeling a warmth she hadn't expected. Dr. Hill arrived, his presence a grounding force as they discussed Oliver's next steps. "So, no one's come looking for him?" Dr. Hill asked, a hint of concern in his voice. Emily shook her head. "Not yet," she replied softly, her eyes drifting to the boy. "He hasn't mentioned a family. Just Buddy." Dr. Hill nodded thoughtfully. "We'll need to contact child services if we can't reach anyone by the end of the day," he said, his tone gentle but firm. Emily's heart sank at the thought. She glanced at Oliver, who was now awake, his gaze meeting hers with an expression of quiet trust. She promised herself she would make this day as comfortable as possible for him, whatever the outcome. To distract Oliver from the uncertainty, Emily decided to spend the day with him and Buddy, hoping to lift his spirits. They explored the clinic, and she let him help with small tasks, like folding bandages and tidying up the exam rooms. Buddy followed them everywhere, his calm presence offering silent support. "Do you like being a nurse?" Oliver asked suddenly, his voice small but curious. Emily paused, surprised by his question. She smiled down at him. "I do," she replied. "I like helping people feel better." Oliver nodded, looking thoughtful. "Buddy helps me feel better," he murmured, reaching down to stroke the dog's head. Emily's heart ached at his words. She felt a deep connection forming, one she hadn't anticipated, and it made her more determined than ever to ensure Oliver was cared for, no matter where his journey led. As they sat in the quiet break room, Oliver began to share stories about his life before coming to the clinic. His words were scattered, piecing together fragments of memories that painted a picture of a life on the move. "We used to stay in different places," he said softly, his eyes fixed on Buddy. "Sometimes we had a house, sometimes we didn't, but Buddy was always there." Emily listened intently, her heart heavy with compassion. She could tell that stability was something he'd rarely known, that his bond with Buddy was perhaps the most consistent thing in his life. She reached out, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "You're very brave, Oliver," she whispered, "and you're lucky to have Buddy with you." The boy smiled, a small but genuine expression that filled the room with warmth. It was a glimpse of hope, a reminder that even amidst uncertainty, he had a loyal friend by his side. Dr. Hill returned later in the day, his expression serious but kind. "Emily, we need to make arrangements," he said, his voice low. Emily's heart tightened. She knew this moment would come, but she wasn't prepared for the pang of protectiveness that surged through her. She turned to Oliver, who was sitting quietly with Buddy. "There's a place where kids who need help can go," she said softly, trying to make her voice reassuring. "It's a safe place, and they'll do their best to help you." Oliver's face fell, his hand gripping Buddy's fur. "Will Buddy come too?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Emily swallowed hard, feeling her emotions catch in her throat. "We'll do everything we can to keep you both together," she promised, even as uncertainty weighed on her. She knew this might not be a promise she could keep, but in that moment, she wanted to believe it with all her heart. As the day wore on, Emily observed Buddy's unwavering loyalty to Oliver. The dog never left his side, as if he understood the gravity of the situation and the comfort he brought to the boy. Every glance, every gentle nudge, conveyed a depth of emotion that Emily found both comforting and heartbreaking. She knelt beside Buddy, her hand resting on his head. "You're a good friend," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Buddy looked at her, his eyes filled with a wisdom that transcended words. It was as if he understood her gratitude, her desire to protect both him and Oliver. In that moment, Emily felt a sense of peace. She wasn't sure what the future held for either of them, but she knew Buddy would never let Oliver face it alone. Just as the sun began to set, Emily's phone buzzed. It was a call from Child Services, and her heart raced as she answered. The voice on the other end explained that they had received a report about Oliver and that a social worker would come by to assess the situation. Emily felt a pang of relief, but also a sense of loss. She knew this was the best course of action for Oliver, but a part of her wished she could keep him safe here, within the walls of Willow Ridge. After the call ended, she turned to Oliver, explaining as gently as she could that someone would be coming to help him. He looked at her with wide, apprehensive eyes, his hand clinging tightly to Buddy's fur. She did her best to reassure him, even as her own heart felt heavy. When the social worker arrived, Emily felt a mixture of relief and sadness. The woman, Miss Taylor, was warm and kind, introducing herself to Oliver with a gentle smile. Buddy stayed close, his eyes never leaving the boy's face as they spoke. Miss Taylor explained that Oliver would be taken to a safe place, where they would work on finding him a permanent home. Emily knelt beside Oliver, her hand resting on his shoulder. "You're going to be okay," she whispered, her voice filled with emotion. "And Buddy will be with you every step of the way." Oliver nodded, his eyes filling with tears as he hugged Buddy tightly. Watching them, Emily felt a lump in her throat, knowing that this goodbye was as painful for her as it was for them. She gave Buddy one last pat, whispering a quiet thank you to the dog who had brought them all together. After Oliver and Buddy left with Miss Taylor, Willow Ridge Clinic felt emptier than ever. Emily wandered through the quiet rooms, reflecting on the impact of the past 2 days. She knew she would never forget Oliver or the loyal dog who had guided her to him. The experience had changed her, leaving an indelible mark on her heart. As she stood in the empty room where Oliver had slept, she whispered a quiet prayer for both of them. She hoped that wherever they went, they would find the love and security they deserved. And as she left the clinic that night, she carried with her a profound sense of gratitude for the quiet miracles life sometimes brings. As she walked home that evening, Emily's thoughts drifted to Buddy. The gentle, wise dog had shown her the true meaning of loyalty and compassion, his presence forever etched in her heart. She couldn't help but think that Buddy would be proud of her for finding this new path, for turning her grief into something meaningful. Emily felt as though Buddy's spirit was still with her, guiding her just as he had guided her to Oliver. She knew she would never forget the warmth in his eyes, the quiet strength he had offered during a time when it was needed most. And as she gazed at the stars, she whispered a quiet thank you, feeling a sense of peace settle over her. One afternoon, as Emily returned from a shift at the clinic, she found a letter waiting for her. The envelope bore no return address, but as she opened it, she recognized the handwriting. It was from Oliver. Her heart raced as she read his words, filled with small details about his new life. He spoke of Buddy, his constant companion, and the new home he had been placed in, describing it as a safe and happy place. Oliver's words touched Emily deeply, and she felt tears fill her eyes. The letter was a reminder that their brief connection had left a lasting impact on him as well. She clutched the letter to her heart, feeling grateful for the closure it brought, knowing that Oliver and Buddy were safe and cared for. With Oliver's letter in hand, Emily felt a renewed sense of purpose. She knew she would continue volunteering, offering companionship and care to children who needed a friend. Her experience with Oliver and Buddy had taught her that small acts of kindness could change lives, that even the briefest connection could make a difference. Standing by the clinic window, she looked out at the world beyond, feeling a quiet confidence settle within her. She was no longer the uncertain nurse who had first walked through the doors of Willow Ridge Clinic. She had found a strength and purpose she hadn't known was possible. And as she moved forward, she carried with her the memory of Oliver and Buddy, a reminder that sometimes the smallest gestures could spark the greatest changes. Emily's days at Willow Ridge Clinic now blended with her work at the Children's Outreach Program. Every shift at the clinic was followed by hours spent at the Outreach Center, offering care, companionship, and a safe presence for the children who came through its doors. Her time was stretched thin, yet she felt more fulfilled than ever. Each day brought new challenges, but she found strength in her memories of Oliver and Buddy. The quiet strength they had shown her, their bond, served as a constant reminder of the impact compassion could have. Her colleagues at the clinic noticed a change in her. She was more focused, more confident, and, above all, more resilient. Emily knew her purpose had shifted, extending beyond the walls of the clinic to the outreach program. With each day, her heart grew more open, and her capacity for empathy deepened in ways she hadn't expected. Among the children at the outreach center, Emily found herself drawn to Lily, the quiet girl who had initially shied away from connection. Each day, Emily made a special effort to spend time with Lily, sitting beside her in comfortable silence until the girl felt safe enough to speak. Over time, Lily opened up, sharing small pieces of her world, her dreams, and her fears. One afternoon, Lily revealed she'd once had a dog, a gentle companion who had been her only friend during difficult times. The memory brought a mix of pain and joy to her young face. Emily felt a pang in her heart, reminded of Buddy and the loyalty he'd shown Oliver. "You know," Emily said softly, "I think dogs are like little angels sent to help us when we need them the most." Lily smiled, nodding, and Emily knew she had made a small breakthrough. Emily's journey through the outreach program also taught her the strength that lay in vulnerability. She shared her own stories with the children, moments of self-doubt and fear she'd experienced as a young nurse. She wanted them to understand that strength wasn't the absence of fear, but the courage to keep moving forward despite it. Her words resonated with the children, and she saw the change in their eyes as they began to trust her more deeply. One day, as they sat in a circle sharing stories, a young boy named Javier looked up at her, his face filled with admiration. "Does it ever stop being scary?" he asked. Emily smiled softly. "No, not always," she replied, "but you learn to be brave. And being brave makes you stronger every time." The children listened, and Emily knew she was making a difference, one small connection at a time. One evening, as Emily was leaving the clinic, she noticed a small, scruffy dog lingering near the entrance. He was thin and wary, his fur matted and his eyes filled with a mixture of fear and curiosity. The sight of him tugged at her heart. She knelt down, holding out her hand, hoping to show him she was a friend. The dog approached cautiously, his nose twitching as he sniffed her hand. Emily could feel a familiar warmth, a quiet connection, similar to what she'd felt with Buddy. She decided to bring him inside, and soon the staff, charmed by the small dog's gentle demeanor, began caring for him too. They named him Rusty, and he quickly became a fixture at Willow Ridge, offering comfort to patients and staff alike. For Emily, Rusty was a reminder of the power of kindness, and she felt Buddy's spirit living on in this new friend. One morning, Emily received a letter addressed to her at the clinic. Inside was a simple note from Oliver's social worker, Ms. Taylor, updating her on his progress. Oliver was thriving, and Buddy was by his side every step of the way. The letter brought tears to Emily's eyes as she read about Oliver's new school, his laughter, his growing circle of friends, and the unwavering bond between him and Buddy. Miss Taylor mentioned that Oliver often spoke of Emily and Willow Ridge Clinic, asking if he could visit someday. Emily felt a surge of joy at the thought. Knowing that Oliver and Buddy were happy and safe brought her a deep peace, allowing her to let go of any lingering worries about them. She tucked the letter into her pocket, a keepsake of the quiet miracles they had shared. Emily's role at the outreach program expanded as she began supporting not only the children, but their families as well. She organized meetings, facilitated support groups, and helped parents and guardians understand the importance of a nurturing environment. Many families faced difficult circumstances, and Emily's calm, reassuring presence provided a much-needed anchor. The families came to trust her deeply, appreciating the way she listened without judgment. They knew she truly cared about their struggles, and her empathy created a safe space where they felt understood. Emily found great meaning in this work, seeing it as a way to honor the experiences she'd shared with Oliver and Buddy. One quiet evening at Willow Ridge, Emily found herself reflecting on the night she'd met Oliver and Buddy. She replayed the moment in her mind, the way Buddy had led her to Oliver, the quiet determination in his eyes, and the bond they had shared. Those memories had become a guiding force, a reminder of why she was drawn to this work. She knew that her time with Oliver and Buddy had marked the beginning of her true journey as a caregiver, one rooted in empathy and compassion. Each day, she felt grateful for the privilege of caring for others, knowing that these small acts of kindness could leave a lasting impact. The memories gave her strength, inspiring her to keep giving back, no matter the challenges she faced. Months passed, and one day, Emily received a call that filled her with joy. Oliver's social worker, Ms. Taylor, had arranged a visit to Willow Ridge Clinic. She would be bringing Oliver and Buddy to reconnect with the place and the person who had first brought them hope. Emily felt her heart race with excitement, thrilled at the chance to see them again. The day of the visit arrived, and as Oliver and Buddy walked through the clinic doors, Emily felt tears prick her eyes. Oliver ran to her, wrapping his small arms around her in a tight hug, while Buddy sat calmly at her side, his wise eyes as warm and gentle as she remembered. They spent the afternoon reminiscing, laughing, and sharing stories, and Emily knew in that moment that this reunion was a gift she would cherish forever. The reunion between Emily, Oliver, and Buddy felt like a celebration. They sat together in the clinic's cozy break room, sharing stories and laughter as if no time had passed at all. Oliver was vibrant and full of life, his face alight with the joy of seeing Emily again. Buddy lay at their feet, calm and content, his wise eyes observing the bond between them with quiet satisfaction. Emily marveled at the transformation in Oliver. The shy, uncertain boy she'd met months ago had grown into a confident young soul, radiating a warmth that filled the room. Seeing him so happy made her heart swell with gratitude, and she realized that their time together had left an indelible mark on her life, a reminder of the healing power of love, compassion, and small acts of kindness. As they sat together, Oliver looked up at Emily, his voice soft yet full of hope. "Do you think we'll see each other again?" he asked, his hand resting on Buddy's fur. Emily smiled, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder. "Of course," she said gently. "You're always welcome here, Oliver. Willow Ridge Clinic is a place for friends, and you and Buddy are forever part of this family." Oliver's face lit up, and he hugged her tightly, as if sealing a promise. Emily felt a profound sense of peace. This was more than just a reunion. It was a testament to the journey they had shared and the growth they had inspired in each other. She knew that no matter where life took them, their bond would remain strong. After Oliver and Buddy left, Emily stood by the window, watching them walk away with a feeling of bittersweet joy. She realized that their journey had come full circle. From that first night in the clinic when Buddy had led her to Oliver, to this moment of joyful reunion, every experience had strengthened her purpose and reaffirmed her belief in the kindness of the human heart. In her role at the Outreach Center, Emily continued to share the lessons she'd learned with children and families, carrying forward the memory of Oliver and Buddy. She knew that the smallest gestures could create ripples of healing and hope, and she committed herself to a life of service, knowing that these connections could transform lives. That night, as Emily closed the clinic, she felt a profound sense of fulfillment. She thought of Oliver's smile, Buddy's loyal gaze, and the quiet strength she discovered within herself. They had taught her the beauty of resilience, the courage found in kindness, and the warmth of companionship. She knew that their story would live on in her heart, a guiding light in every step she took. As she walked home under a starlit sky, Emily whispered a quiet thank you, feeling the presence of her dear friends with her. And with each step, she carried forward their shared legacy of love, healing, and hope, a reminder that no act of kindness, no matter how small, is ever wasted.